Over 60 and waking up at the same time almost every night, right around 3 a.m., your eyes open, your heart feels alert, your mind is suddenly on, even though your body is exhausted. That pattern isn't random, and it isn't simply a normal part of aging. When sleep breaks at the same hour, night after night, it usually means one thing. Your internal chemistry is being pulled out of balance at a very specific point in the night. What if I told you that for millions of adults over 60, this 3 a.m. wake up has nothing to do with stress, overthinking, or poor sleep habits, but with a quiet mineral imbalance that interferes with how the brain controls cortisol, heart rhythm, and deep sleep maintenance? I'm Dr. Jonathan Reid. I specialize in sleep physiology in older adults, and I see this pattern constantly. People who fall asleep just fine, but can't stay asleep past the early morning hours. Tonight, I'm going to break down 6 minerals that quietly determine whether your nervous system holds sleep together, counting down to the one deficiency most strongly linked to the 3 a.m. wake-up pattern. Stay with me, because correcting this doesn't just help you sleep longer. It helps your heart stay calm at night, your brain stay settled, and your mornings start clear instead of exhausted. If this sounds familiar, tap like so this reaches others over 60 who need it, subscribe for science-based senior health, and in the comments tell me, what time do you usually wake up during the night? Number 6, selenium, the oxidative shield. Selenium rarely gets mentioned in the sleep conversations, and that's exactly why it matters here. This mineral doesn't make you sleepy. It doesn't knock you out. Its role is quieter, but foundational. After 60, the brain becomes far more vulnerable to overnight oxidative stress, especially during the early morning hours when cortisol begins its natural rise. Selenium is one of the body's primary defenses against that stress. When levels drift even slightly low, the brain loses its ability to buffer hormonal shifts that normally happen without waking you. Here's what that looks like in real life. A common pattern I see is this. Someone falls asleep easily, sleeps deeply for the first few hours, then wakes up alert around 2:45 or 3:15 a.m. There's no panic, no nightmare, just a sudden sense that the night is over, even though the body is still tired. One patient, Michael, age 67, described it perfectly. "I don't wake up anxious," he told me. "I wake up switched on. My heart feels lighter. My brain is ready for the day. Way too early." Michael's sleep habits were solid. No late caffeine, no alcohol, no sleep apnea. His labs didn't show anything dramatic, except one thing: low normal selenium, combined with reduced thyroid hormone activation. That connection matters. Selenium is required to convert thyroid hormone into its active form. When that conversion slows, something that happens commonly with age, the nervous system becomes less stable at night. Not overstimulated, not diseased, just unstable enough that early cortisol signals feel louder than they should. At the same time, low selenium increases oxidative noise in the brain. The result is a nervous system that can't stay quiet during the fragile early morning window. That's why selenium deficiency shows up as good sleep onset, poor sleep maintenance, alert awakenings instead of groggy ones. Importantly, selenium is not a bedtime mineral. Taking it at night can actually make things worse for some people. Its job is to lower baseline stress and improve hormonal stability earlier in the day, so nighttime signals don't misfire. For most seniors, the best approach is food first: eggs, seafood, whole grains, and occasionally Brazil nuts. If supplementation is needed, it should be low dose and taken in the morning, never as a sleep aid. Selenium won't stop a 3 a.m. wake-up by itself, and it shouldn't try to. Its role is to calm the background chemistry so the minerals ahead of it can do their real work. That's why selenium sits at number 6. Not dramatic, not controversial, but essential to rebuilding nighttime stability. Number 5, the heart-brain night connector potassium. Potassium is where the picture starts to feel personal for many people, because you don't need a severe deficiency for it to disrupt your night. You only need to be slightly low, low enough that your heart and nervous system stop coordinating smoothly during sleep. After 60, potassium regulation becomes more fragile. Kidney handling changes. Many common blood pressure medications increase potassium loss. And sodium restriction, which many seniors follow very strictly, can quietly push potassium balance even further off center. The result isn't dramatic, it's subtle. But at night, subtle imbalances matter. Potassium helps stabilize electrical signaling between the heart and the brain. When levels dip, even mildly, the heart becomes more reactive during the early morning hours. Not dangerously irregular, but active enough that the brain notices. That's why potassium-related awakenings often feel like this. You wake with a clear sense of your heartbeat. Your chest feels on or slightly jumpy. There's restlessness rather than fear. One patient, Linda, age 72, came in convinced she had anxiety. She woke almost every night around 3 a.m. Heart noticeable, body uneasy, mind alert. Her cardiac workup was normal. Her sleep study was unremarkable. Her stress levels were average. But her potassium, again, was low normal. Not flagged, not alarming, just low enough to matter at night. Once her potassium intake was corrected, through food, not pills, something interesting happened. She still woke occasionally, but the heart-driven alertness disappeared. When she did wake, she could fall back asleep instead of lying there tuned into every beat. That's the key role potassium plays. It doesn't prevent waking entirely. It prevents the heart from pulling the brain into full alert mode when sleep becomes fragile. Potassium deficiency shows up as waking with heart awareness, subtle nighttime palpitations, restlessness without anxiety, early morning fatigue despite enough sleep hours. This is especially common in seniors who take diuretics, eat very low sodium, sweat easily, rely heavily on processed low-salt foods. Correction should always start with food: leafy greens, beans, squash, avocado. Supplements require caution and medical oversight. Potassium is powerful, and more is not better. That's why potassium sits at number 5. It's not the core switch, but it's often the first mineral that makes someone realize their 3 a.m. wake-ups aren't psychological. They're electrical. And once the heart stops signaling distress, the brain becomes much easier to quiet. Next, we move to the mineral that controls the mind itself when sleep should be deepest. Number 4, zinc, the mental noise circuit breaker. Zinc is where many people finally recognize themselves, because this mineral doesn't affect the heart first, it affects the mind. After 60, zinc availability in the brain declines quietly. Absorption drops. Inflammation interferes with transport, and many seniors unknowingly reduce zinc intake while focusing on calcium or vitamin D instead. The result isn't anxiety in the daytime, it's something far more specific. Zinc plays a critical role in regulating GABA signaling and dampening excessive cortisol amplification in the brain. When zinc runs low, the nervous system loses its ability to contain arousal once it starts. That's why zinc-related awakenings often feel like this. You wake up unusually alert, your thoughts are sharp, fast, and intrusive. There's no fear, no panic, just a mind that won't slow back down. One patient, Robert, age 69, described it perfectly. I wake up at 3 a.m. feeling like I've had coffee, but I haven't. He didn't feel stressed. He wasn't worried about anything in particular. But once awake, his mind immediately latched onto plans, memories, or abstract thoughts, and sleep was over. His cortisol rhythm showed a subtle amplification spike overnight, and his zinc intake, again, was low normal. Not deficient by lab standards, just insufficient for nighttime neural stability. After correcting zinc through diet and a carefully timed low-dose supplement, the change wasn't dramatic, but it was decisive. He still woke occasionally, but the mental noise no longer surged. That's zinc's role. It doesn't knock you out. It prevents a small awakening from escalating into full cognitive activation. Signs zinc may be involved: waking with a clear, busy mind, racing thoughts without emotional stress, difficulty turning off again after waking, lighter sleep in the second half of the night. This is not psychological weakness. It's neurochemical braking failure. Zinc restores the brain's ability to apply the brakes when sleep becomes fragile, especially in the early morning hours when cortisol is naturally trying to rise. That's why zinc sits at number 4. It's not the deepest switch yet, but for many adults over 60, it's the first mineral that explains why their mind wakes before their body's ready. And next, we'll look at the mineral that challenges one of the most deeply held beliefs about sleep and aging. Number 3, the midnight stability calcium. Calcium is where many long-held beliefs quietly fall apart. Most people think of calcium as a daytime mineral, something for bones, teeth, posture, and fracture prevention. Very few realize that calcium also plays a time-sensitive role in holding sleep together, especially after 3 a.m. Here's the key point most seniors are never told. Calcium levels naturally dip during the early morning hours. In a well-balanced system, that dip is mild and well-buffered. But when baseline calcium is already low or poorly regulated, that normal dip becomes a wake-up trigger. Calcium is required for the brain to properly convert signals involved in melatonin maintenance and sleep continuity. When levels drop too far, the brain interprets it as a stress signal, even if nothing external is wrong. That's why calcium-related awakenings often feel subtle but decisive. You wake suddenly without panic. Your body feels on, not relaxed. Sleep feels impossible to re-enter, even though you're tired. A patient named Elaine, age 71, experienced this pattern for years. She fell asleep easily every night, but between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m., she woke, not anxious, not uncomfortable, just done with sleep. She assumed it was aging. Her bone density scans were stable, so calcium was never questioned. But when we looked at nighttime calcium availability, the picture changed. Her intake was concentrated in the morning, absorption was impaired, and magnesium intake was inconsistent, creating an imbalance right when calcium stability mattered most. After shifting calcium intake earlier in the evening, pairing it correctly with magnesium, and focusing on food-based sources rather than high-dose supplements, something important happened. She still woke occasionally, but the hard stop disappeared. Sleep became flexible again. That's calcium's overlooked role. It doesn't make you sleepy. It keeps the sleep state structurally intact when the brain tries to transition between stages in the early morning. Signs calcium may be involved. Waking at nearly the same early morning time. Inability to return to sleep despite calmness. Lighter sleep after 3 a.m. Long-term focus on bone health without considering timing. This is why calcium sits at number 3, not because people lack it completely, but because timing, balance, and nighttime availability matter far more than most realize. And next, we move into a mineral that surprises almost everyone, not because it's missing, but because it's often too restricted in the wrong people at the wrong time. Number 2, sodium, the conditional trigger mineral. Sodium is where this conversation becomes uncomfortable, and that's exactly why it belongs near the top of the list. Most seniors have spent decades being told the same message. Less salt is always better. For daytime blood pressure, that advice often makes sense. But nighttime physiology plays by different rules. Here's the critical distinction most people never hear. For some older adults, not all but a specific subgroup, sodium that drops too low overnight becomes a stress signal. Sodium is not just about fluid balance. It is a key regulator of nighttime blood pressure stability, adrenal signaling, and heart-brain communication during sleep. When sodium levels fall too far during the night, the body compensates by activating stress hormones, particularly aldosterone and cortisol, to keep blood pressure from dropping dangerously low. That compensation often peaks around the same window many seniors wake up, between 2:45 and 3:30 a.m. This is why sodium is framed as a conditional trigger, not a universal fix. I want to be very clear. This is not a recommendation for high salt intake. This is not for everyone, and it is never about adding salt blindly. But in older adults who eat very low sodium diets, use diuretics or certain blood pressure medications, restrict salt aggressively out of fear, experience early morning fatigue, lightheadedness, or vague weakness, low nighttime sodium can quietly destabilize sleep. One patient, Robert, age 74, illustrates this perfectly. Robert did everything right. He avoided salt. He ate clean. His daytime blood pressure was excellent. Yet he woke almost every night around 3 a.m., feeling drained. Not anxious, not panicked, just strangely off. Standing up in the morning made him briefly dizzy. He assumed this was just aging. When we reviewed his routine, the pattern was clear. Low sodium intake all day, diuretic use, and no evening electrolytes. Under medical supervision, we made a very modest adjustment, focusing on balanced electrolytes earlier in the evening, not salt loading, not late-night eating. Within weeks, the 3 a.m. awakenings softened. The morning weakness improved. Sleep stopped feeling fragile. Why? Because sodium helps stabilize nighttime blood pressure curves. When it drops too far, the brain responds by raising cortisol, and cortisol does not care that you are asleep. Signs sodium may be involved. Waking around 3 a.m., feeling weak or drained, lightheadedness in the morning, low blood pressure readings with nighttime awakenings, heavy sodium restriction combined with medications. This is why sodium sits at number 2. Not because it's missing in everyone, but because when it's too low in the wrong person, it can trigger the exact hormonal response that breaks sleep at 3 a.m. And next we arrive at the core switch, the mineral most directly tied to calming cortisol, stabilizing the nervous system, and holding sleep together through the early morning hours. Number 1, magnesium, the core switch that holds sleep together. If there is one mineral that consistently sits at the center of the 3 a.m. wake-up pattern, it is magnesium. Not because it's trendy, not because it's calming in general, but because magnesium directly controls the systems that fail at 3 a.m. in older adults. Magnesium is the body's primary parasympathetic regulator, the mineral that tells your nervous system it is safe to stay asleep. After 60, magnesium levels drift downward for several reasons. Absorption becomes less efficient, medications increase urinary loss, stress hormones consume magnesium faster, dietary intake quietly drops. And when magnesium runs low, 3 critical things happen at night. First, cortisol buffering weakens. Normally, magnesium dampens the cortisol rise that naturally occurs in the early morning hours. When levels are insufficient, that rise becomes exaggerated, sharp enough to wake the brain. Second, GABA signaling loses stability. GABA is the neurotransmitter that keeps neural activity quiet during sleep. Magnesium acts as a cofactor at GABA receptors. Without enough of it, the brain becomes more reactive to internal signals. Heart rhythm, temperature shifts, minor blood pressure changes. Third, muscle and vascular microtension increase. Even when you're not aware of it, subtle tension in the chest, neck, diaphragm, and calves sends alert signals back to the brain. Magnesium normally prevents this low-grade tension from building during sleep. Put simply, low magnesium removes the brakes at exactly the wrong time of night. This is why magnesium is so strongly linked to the classic pattern. Fall asleep without difficulty, then wake up suddenly between 2:45 and 3:30 a.m. with an alert mind and a body that feels on. I see this repeatedly in clinic. One patient, Linda, age 69, described it clearly. I don't wake up anxious. I wake up awake. Her heart wasn't racing. Her thoughts weren't negative. But once she woke, sleep was gone. Lab work showed magnesium at the low end of normal, not deficient by hospital standards, but insufficient for nighttime nervous system control. We adjusted timing, not just intake, food sources during the day, a gentle, well-absorbed form in the evening. Nothing excessive, nothing sedating. Within 2 weeks, the pattern changed. She still woke occasionally, but the sharp, fully alert 3 a.m. awakenings faded. Sleep stopped breaking apart. That's the key distinction. Magnesium doesn't knock you out. It holds sleep together. Signs magnesium may be your core issue. Waking at the same early morning hour most nights, light muscle tightness or jaw tension at night, feeling wired but not anxious, restless sleep without obvious stress. And this is why magnesium earns the number 1 position, because among all 6 minerals we've discussed, magnesium most directly buffers cortisol, stabilizes GABA, relaxes microtension, supports melatonin's ability to maintain sleep. Correcting it doesn't just help you sleep longer. It helps your nervous system remember how to stay quiet when the night is supposed to be quiet. And that, more than anything, is what breaks the 3 a.m. wake-up cycle. If you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Waking up at 3 a.m. is not random, and it is not something you simply have to accept with age. That moment, night after night, is a very specific biological checkpoint. Around 3 a.m., cortisol naturally begins to rise. Heart rhythm becomes more sensitive. Blood pressure regulation shifts, and the brain decides whether it can stay in deep, restorative sleep or whether it needs to pull you back toward alertness. In a younger body, that transition is smooth. In an older body, it depends heavily on mineral balance. What you've seen tonight is that sleep after 60 doesn't usually collapse all at once. It fractures when one or two critical minerals drift just low enough at the wrong time. Selenium protects the brain from oxidative stress, so cortisol doesn't overreact. Potassium keeps the heart-brain signaling steady as blood pressure changes overnight. Zinc quiets neural amplification so thoughts don't suddenly turn on. Calcium supports melatonin signaling right when sleep is most fragile. Sodium, in certain seniors, prevents a stress response triggered by nighttime volume shifts. And magnesium sits at the center, buffering cortisol, stabilizing the nervous system, relaxing micromuscle tension, and helping the brain hold sleep together. Most people don't need to fix everything, but almost everyone with a 3 a.m. wake-up has one weak link. And once that link is corrected, the night often stabilizes far more than they expect. This is why I want to be very clear about something. Aging does change the body, but it does not remove your ability to sleep through the night. What it changes is how sensitive your system becomes to small chemical shifts. When those shifts are addressed correctly, sleep often returns. Not perfectly, but consistently. If waking up at the same hour every night has been quietly worrying you, I hope this gave you something better than reassurance: clarity. Because once you understand why your body wakes when it does, sleep stops feeling unpredictable. It becomes something you can influence again. If this helped put the pieces together, tap like so it reaches others over 60 who are still searching for answers. Subscribe for clear, science-based guidance focused on how the aging body actually works at night. And before you go, let me know in the comments. What time do you usually wake up? And which mineral do you think might be your missing link? We'll keep breaking this down, one system at a time. I'll see you in the next video.